I'd like to introduce Lori Stewart. 20 Tevis buckles out of 23 starts, which is actually just very incredible. I don't know if anybody's ever been able to do that. She is a Western States board member. She's on the Endurance Capital Committee, the Endurance Capital of the World, Auburn, California. She is also the director of the Tevis Ed Ride, and just a great philosopher of horse knowledge. And when I say the word Tevis, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, heat and preparation, coaching. The Tevis, and then you can say what comes to mind with the Western States Trail. That's fundamentally my relationship.
Is the trail.
Is with the Western States Trail.
Yeah.
It's a national treasure, and what the Tevis does for us is focus our attention on getting a horse fit enough to enjoy it in one day. And I think that's the best way to enjoy it, because it brings in the energy, the intensity, probably the most parallels to when it was first used, just because they started each day with less.
Well, when we talk about the ride and the Western States Trail, and I'm glad you differentiated between Tevis and this trail, because the Western States Trail is its own entity, and the Tevis is the Western States 100-mile one-day ride, known as the Tevis.
Right.
Like you said, is just one way that we get to see and enjoy and accept that challenge of the trail.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think it's important, because you have such a vast history, that we need to start from the beginning. And that's your background, where you grew up, and your background with horses prior to being introduced to the sport of endurance.
So my background with horses started when I was 9 years old. My father had acreage there out in North San Diego County in Escondido. Mm-hmm. I'm one of 5 girls, and my oldest sister and I had the idea of having a mule, a pack animal, because we were raised free range, and the idea of having something that could carry our toys down to the creek was a pretty cool deal. So beg, my father, good sense, he said, we finally started to wear him down. We were getting old enough, and because she would have been 10 and I would have been 8, and so it takes a while. He said he had this boneyard. All farms, ranches have got boneyards of old equipment, broken glass, you name it. And he said, if you can clear that, I'll get the big stuff out, but if you can clear that of all the glass, all the stuff that could harm a horse, then okay.
And that would be your pasture for your horse.
That would be everything. Because he used old irrigation pipe, that cast iron stuff from the desert. He and his father had salvaged some. He welded the first corral together.
Wow.
So we always enjoyed calling it the elephant stockade. So we didn't have lessons. So what we did is there was Escondido Valley Riders. He grew up with the guys who ran that. It was like a dude ranch, dude stable. And my mom, who was German and knew absolutely nothing about horses, my father could never leave. So she took us there, and the horse she picked, because he had a pretty head. Found out later he was half Arabian, half thoroughbred. And he was an ideal first horse. Of course, he was sold to us for $150 under the guise that he was, as they all are, 10 to 14 years old, just so you know. And he turned out to be in his 20s. But as you have your horse races on the playgrounds, the grammar schools, he was fast. He could beat the girls with more money and had the pure quarter horses. Yeah, he was fast. And we did everything bareback or bareback
I was
pad.
going to ask if you had a
Yeah,
saddle.
because it took over a year to have a saddle given to us. So we started using that. So that was the start. And then a couple of years, a year or so later, we got another horse because my father liked the fact that we were onto boys and not, I mean, onto horses and not boys. So that was a safe bet for him. And we just took to it. We just took to it. You know, all the games. Anyway, the silliness.
And you grew up on a farm?
Yes, on a ranch.
On
Yeah.
a ranch?
Yeah. We and barefoot. We did not wear shoes except to church and school.
Yep.
Period. So, which was fabulous.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't have to look for your shoes in the morning. You just take off. But we did have to wear socks to bed because with 7 people in a 1-bathroom house, you don't get to shower every night or bathe. So my mom didn't want to do the sheets, so we wore socks to bed.
What an upbringing.
A smart German lady, yes, who grew up during World War II, yeah.
Wow.
So anyway, yeah, so we know how to have a really good time.
So you had this background, basically, seat of your pants, learn how to ride bareback.
With very strict rules with my father to ride the ground. Because of course, he couldn't afford to put shoes on him.
Yeah.
And a guy who was worked down at Del Mar as a jockey in the morning, and then he'd shoe, you know, by headlight in the evening. He would do our trimming for our horses. And my father was about, don't move them fast on bad ground.
Yeah. That was good advice.
And I'll tell you what, there it is.
So moving forward, you go from living on the ranch, and you know, after you graduated from high school, you went to college.
Went to UC Davis.
Okay.
And that was the other thing that really turned from what was so common at that time. You know, a woman's currency was how appealing she was and all that stuff. So for me, I decided I wanted to go to vet school. And I had really mediocre grades. But I had a great counselor in high school. And I took a class that was at the other high school, an ag class that was taught by the FFA guy who later wrote a recommendation to Davis for me because he was a UC graduate. And my grades went from C's to straight A's.
Very
and
nice.
Good recommendations, and I got into Davis, which was shock and awe for our family because I was the first one to go to college. So anyway, that put me at UC Davis. And over my head, but what the heck?
You don't seem like somebody who would be too intimidated by being over your head. Trials and tribulations. Yeah.
Yes, but no, I would fight for what was right. Like that class we took at the competing high school or crosstown rivalry. We lobbied to the principals in the district to allow us to go, because we had no ag class at my high school. But we wanted an ag class, so there were 4 of us. So we lobbied, we got it. They gave us 10 minutes to get from school to school, and we rode a 10-speed bike most days. So we rode really, really fast. Yes, that was my first car.
Wow.
So we took that class, and I hope others were able to do it. The other thing is they didn't have an advanced biology class, so with my counselor, we lobbied and we got that accreditation, and that was really cool for my biology teacher because then he was working on his PhD.
Yeah.
So that was cool. So if you don't have it, you make it happen. Is that a farming thing?
I think it's a farming thing. Yes, it is. So at UC Davis, is this where you met your
met
husband?
Rick? Yes, yes. First, early in my freshman year, I was taking physics. I was dating a roommate of his who was also in physics class. Went to a party. There's a good-looking guy who plays a great banjo. And we started visiting, and then he had the great car, the Triumph TR3, the sports car, and he was a really nice guy.
Yeah.
And the rest is history.
The rest is history.
So I was only 19 at the time, 18, 19. So we got married just as I turned 20.
While you were still in college.
Oh, of course.
Yeah.
And we got married September 7th. He started vet school in October.
Wow.
While we were dating, he was accepted to vet school. And he did accomplish that. He was with 3 years of undergrad.
Wow. So this brings us to a point in your life where you got involved in endurance or long distance riding, I should say. Because tell us the story about how you looked at a bulletin board and
Yeah.
your life changed.
Well, those are the ways a turn of events can happen. Not only do you see it, but you act on it.
Yes.
So very early in our knowing one another, and we were getting serious, he said, I never want 2 years of our lives to look the same. Because too much of the previous generation was that 9 to 5, a grinding job that creates unhappy men and lonely housewives, and who the heck wants that? So it was, let's make life interesting. So he's first year of veterinary school, and actually, in 75, long distance riding started for me in high school. My girlfriends and I would go up to the Wahita. Those who know Valley Center know the Wahita Mountains, and we would ride up. And a friend of my dad's had a big ranch up there. So we would camp out. He'd bring our gear up. We'd camp out in those dried ponds. Okay. And that was long distance riding. And I actually organized that because obviously I was pre-adapted for what I do now. I mean,
It was
a
setting
script
you up.
was written and I was just following it. So then, and then the first year after we were married, God, that was in the vet school too. There was bulletin board. His first year, they needed packers up at Reds Meadow Pack Station.
I was going to ask you about that because I know you and Rick packed with Larry Goss.
Oh, yeah.
Another amazing veterinarian that we lost
An amazing
too soon.
man, yes.
Yeah.
And boy, he
and a Tevis vet.
and we
Rick
took undergraduate classes together in animal science.
Yeah.
So I kind of knew Larry actually even before we worked the pack station together. So Bob Tanner got a twofer in that he hired Rick, and then I came along and I actually took care of the books and the day riders and all that kind of thing. But you're up there just when you go, you're dropping down into Reds Meadow, you go through Mammoth Lakes, and you look over there and you see the minarets and you see Banner and you see all that Devil's Post Pile. That was our playground for the summer.
Wow.
And we had so much fun because we're all college students or guys that worked the ski lifts in Mammoth in the winter. They did the packing in the summer. Larry had worked for Bob Tanner for a number of years already. Larry had financed his entire education shoeing.
I knew that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He was
really good.
Good farrier.
So he's the one who taught Rick to shoe. And the really cool thing with pack station work, as long as they walk off sound, you're solid.
You're good. The shoes stay on.
And
You're okay.
yep, you hear a little hollow sound, man, you're going to do something before the next trip. But
Right. Right.
no.
That's where I got my start shoeing.
So you
was
know.
working the pack stables.
And you do a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then not all of them say, sure, do whatever you want.
No.
No, they don't. So anyway, no, we were very blessed. So then the next summer, Bob was begging us to come back, Bob Tanner. And Rick's second year in vet school, again, you're cruising the bulletin boards, and there's a notice that Hank Cook had put up, because he was hired by the Great American Horse Race organizers to recruit vet students to help take P&Rs and herd these cats across the country. So,
And Hank Cook is a veterinarian. He vetted endurance rides, Tevis.
Oh.
He had such a great history with this sport as well. And so you're talking about these people that have helped make this sport where it is today.
oh, they're the roots
Yeah.
and the foundation,
Yeah.
and everything else has flourished from that.
So Hank Cook puts a bulletin or puts something up on the bulletin board.
And it basically said looking, for vet students. And what the race organizers promised was, I forget, some a monthly stipend salary and a plane ticket back to New York with, a connect to Herkimer County, New York. So for us on student loans, we're going, they're paying for a plane ticket back east. Whether or not we get home, the way as planned, that's to be seen. And fortunately, we both had the same spirit, because those kinds of things, you're too chicken to do yourself, maybe.
Yeah.
But when you've got a like-minded person, then you sign up. So we did.
So the Great American Horse Race is a story of its own. I mean,
yes, very much so.
And now you look back, that was 1976. There's few people that that are around now that that experienced that. And you were young. You were going on this adventure.
And all the other college students there, oh my word. And then I met Kate Reardon straight away. And Kate's got a laugh to end all laughs,
Yeah.
I mean, anyway, so we would all pile in, fill in the blanks, car, truck, whoever, and go into town and get ice cream or whatever the heck we're going to do. I can't even remember. I don't know where we slept, really. Together, obviously, but where, I'm not sure. With the Great American Horse Race. Well, at first, we ended up, the whole thing starts, and that's fun because there was a German contingent, so I met Linda Dellington Jones straight away. And her Germans on the Icelandic ponies.
The Icelandic.
So they're putting on little demonstrations and this and that in Herkimer County before we all launched. And then within the month, they were broke. It's kind of how those things are. And, reality hit, and they're having to trailer their horses a lot. But for a master class in learning lameness evaluation from the absolute best we still have in the sport, I mean, I was scribe for Dave Nicholson and Bruce Branscombe.
Yeah.
As was, Rick working with them. So there are masters out there reading the tea leaves.
And now Dave Nicholson, the Duck,
Yeah.
is what he's known as mostly,
Right.
because we do the duck rides.
Right.
He rode Tevis. I think his first Tevis was in '67 or early, mid '60s.
Yes.
And was
He was NHERC national champion.
was an incredible horseman.
I mean, he still is. But
Yeah.
I mean, if he
Yeah.
get on a horse, I think muscle memory would go.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, no,
So another amazing
Mentor.
opportunity to be in his presence, especially young and energetic and.
and as was he was between wives, and it was interesting for all of us to be at the nightly meetings. We very quickly gravitated, because we worked with mules, to Eva Taylor, who was riding Hugo Mule and Sugar Mule, and we became friends, and she needed a driver for her rig, so that gave us a place to sleep.
Okay.
Yeah. And then what a teacher, and Eva Taylor.
Wow.
What's interesting for Eva is that she had already won the Hagen Cup on Hugo, so I think she finished like 9th or something, and but she was a journalist for Field and Stream, because they're big outdoorsmen, her and her husband, and she wrote under a ghost name, a pen name, because women were not published, period. But she was a brilliant woman, and she was looking to write a book. So we would go to these nightly meetings. Without fail, it was always a fist fight. That was guaranteed, because there were some hot egos. You don't gather that many people.
Smokey Killen.
Oh, and Diane.
Diane Marquardt now.
Marquardt.
It was Diane Claggett at the time.
And then there were a lot. I mean, they did not stand out. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
From
you had
all over the country, Georgia.
Vietnam vets that showed up that were just kind of lost in their own world,
Yes.
and that showed up with a horse.
It was like a life crisis for a lot of people. We came to appreciate during that event and after, looking back. The why the heck did you? It was that sort of thing. So, people, so anyway, you end up with things to talk about after the meeting, and Eva to write about. So then we get to Kankakee, Illinois, and again, out of money, the fist fights are getting hotter, and they were going to have to figure something out. So that's when Dave Nicholson and Hal Sinclair and the Germans, a couple of the Germans guy were interested, Max Endemauer. He went to, not Dodge City, he went to St. Joe, Missouri, did a side trip, and went to the museum and found out that Sears had done a multi-year ad campaign using the Pony Express Trail for its photography.
Yeah.
So what that did was made him aware of the maps they had put together.
Okay.
And made aware of the fact that it was a state-dedicated trail and marked in most states. Pretty amazing. So they started, so that whiffs back to us that I think Phil and Hal were going, 5 of the Germans were going, and so we thought, what the heck, we're going to go over there and see what the heck's going on. I think we rode over with Hal. So we were all sitting around, and he was going to work for Dave, and then I was going to do my thing again. We're sitting there at breakfast one morning, and they're all talking about their plans for the horses and this, that, and the other thing, and I'm sitting there thinking, so I'm going to ride, and I'm going to win it. Didn't tell Rick, didn't tell anybody. I just made that decision. And when you make those decisions, and that is a big lesson for Tevis, you make that decision. All decisions in your life inform that.
Yes.
And it makes life better because it's linear, it's goal-oriented, it's disciplined, it's all good. So then how do you make that happen? And that's when Dave Nicholson stepped in. And again, he was NATRC national champion. And he was very good friends of Ellis Ruby. And Ellis was very good with Gene and Gloria Fells. And what they did in their friendship is Gene and Gloria Fells, they worked wherever they could, but always together for years in a psych hospital as nurses, or years developing film. But on the side, their passion were these endurance horses. And they either were given or bought cheaply 4 crippled Almara Knight daughters. Okay. Those were the broodmares. And then they had a stallion they identified, and was their stallion Rissamir, who was an Abu Farwa line bred. And they had that eye. Their son had a half Arabian, half standard bred, and he was in the Army at the time. So when Dave called, they loved hearing from Dave.
Yeah.
Donald. And he explained what was going on. So then Dave put me on the phone. Hi, you don't know me, but you know Dave, what had happened. And they said, we would trust Donald with our lives. So we can trust our horses with him. And if he'll vouch for you. So I had never, of course, I had nothing. And they showed up 2 days before we started with a load that was coming from Rush Creek for another rider, Patty, blanking your last name, real dear friends with Kate Reardon. And Patty had worked the Great American Horse Race, and she had left also. So she got her horses from Ellis, and on the way back, they picked up my two, because they had a 4-horse stock trailer. And a saddle, which I later found out, an English saddle, forward seat that had a broken tree. Oh. So that was an early treeless saddle with a flexible tree. We cracked up about that. And basic headgear. Red was a made horse. I mean, he was 12. He had done NATRAC. He was, quote, a coyote hunter, fox hunter with their son, which became an issue when you're in the middle of nowhere and he sees them. Oh. Anyway. And then Retro was trained at halter. He was a halter champion prior in his little kid years. And then they trained him to stop if he was in agreement and pull rein. And he had manners. That's where he started. Wow. And the first day I used Red to get out of town because they did a parade. And I pictured
that was the one you trusted the most?
Yes. Well, yes, yes. Oh, and Carrie Ridgway was with us at the time.
Okay, another great
another foundation vet.
And,
yeah. And he was funny because he had bought a mail truck, to scoot around.
Is that what he was camping in?
Yeah, that was pretty much his vehicle. So that first day, I took Red out of town. I have a picture of Dave riding an Icelandic pony, which Dave is well over 6 feet. So it almost looked like he had a strider, And then the last part of the day, we could trade off our horses during the day. And the last part of the day, I rode Retro for the first time for a few miles. And when he came in, Kerry told me later, he said, I almost didn't let you start that horse. He was pendulously obese. I mean, scary stuff. Me, I'd never endurance rode, and I'd done long distance trail riding, pack station, my own stuff. Never been endurance riding, so I didn't really appreciate how frightening. What would that body score be? What's the biggest, fattest one you can get? 5, 6?
Yeah, something
okay,
like
up there
that.
in the stars, yeah. So he was pendulously fat, which probably helped me because it was hot and humid.
Yeah.
So he would not have put on his biggest self. And I'm riding along the road, and Retro had a single foot. He had a 4-beat gait. And he was smooth as glass. He could drop into that instead of a trot. He could just fall into that. And Carrie's going down the road, parallel to where we were riding. And he said, be careful with that horse, because he's seeing this natural roll happening on this pendulously huge Arabian.
Yeah.
I just thought, uh-oh. So anyway, my whole thing was, as long as the horses were good to go, I would go. And that works really well because then you have no decisions to make. Didn't matter that the first day I had both insides of my calves had balled up tight, so you have a baseball rubbing against that. And my hat had blown up. It was one of those floppy ones you get out of the drugstore. And it had blown back in the fog and then dried that way. So my lips were sunburned, swollen, quick to be very bloody. Anyway, those were the Achilles heel for the summer, I think. Because these heal, but the lips were a struggle. And that first night, we slept in the back of the horse trailer because we had nothing. We had 2 sleeping bags. They didn't zip together. So you clean out the back of the horse trailer, and we lived out of a cardboard box with Tree Sweet orange juice, Doritos, Velveeta cheese, and salami.
That was it.
That was it. But none of that needed refrigeration. And the salami, I'd learned at the pack station. You're never without a salami on your saddle. You know, that's just your sustenance. So,
so you brought the 2 horses. Now there was, when it originally started, you had a pony your horse. Did
That was Great American
that
Horse
okay?
Race.
But this when it split off,
Dave set it up smart.
Dave set it up where you could meet your horse, meet a second horse
Yes.
if you
The other,
if you
yes,
wanted to.
exactly.
Yeah.
So what that allowed me to do for the young horse is let the older horse take the lion's share and then ease the miles up on the younger horse.
Yeah.
Just ease it up. And what I would do is let them trot until they broke sweat, walk until the sweat started really dry, and then I'd let them trot again. And the other endurance riders, because, I mean, think about it, my mentors were Hal Hall and Phil Gardner.
Yeah.
And boy, can they tell good stories. And we got 2,000 miles to cover, so you get to hear all the stories.
Yeah.
So they would, of course, I'm riding by myself a lot because I'm riding too slow. I come in last every day. But again, that goes to my upbringing. You're riding the ground, and I never want to see a lather on these horses.
Yeah. So you made it to Sacramento.
Yeah.
And so that was the beginning of this addiction, or what do you want to call it?
Well, yeah, the affliction. Yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Yeah.
Because we went from shopping, you know, where are we going to set up practice? Rick was thinking Reno, we were thinking Cloverdale, because I'd done undergraduate research at the Hopland Field Station. So we kind of had areas we really liked, but we had made forever friends on the Pony Express.
Yeah.
So it was a natural thing to then that fall, we would get away from school. I kept the 2 horses. By then we were living in Woodland because I took a horse with me to college.
So I was going to ask you that. You kept both the horses that you took through. Good for you.
The intent was to send them home, well, especially Retro, because that's the young horse, he was Gene Fell's personal baby. But they came out and met me in person, and Rick, when we were going through Nebraska, and we, of course, hit it off. And I think he was comfortable then.
Wow.
If I wanted it to keep Retro. And again, I put them on the map. I mean, I won the darn thing with their horses.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Nothing says good breeding like that. So, yeah, and again, I'd had my own horse at college, so we had moved to Woodland when we got back from the XP. I had to go back. Rick had to leave early. I was on my own after Salt Lake because he had to finish his finals for veterinary school from the previous year because we had cut out early to do the GAR. And then I had to re-enter into mundane student life. Just say my grades that quarter weren't fabulous.
Yeah.
That was culture shock. We all went through culture shock. So, and then in the fall, and then we knew Shannon and Phil by then. So on the weekends, and Hal, we would rendezvous up in Auburn, usually at Hal's place, and then ride the train. Playing. That was the escape.
So Auburn was the natural place to settle. After
Yes. Well, it genuinely was. Well, what also happened is Lewis,
that. Cliff.
no. Bill Lewis, who owned the Auburn Veterinary Clinic,
Oh, yeah.
he built that practice in the early, mid-50s. I don't know, Dave, do you know? Anyway, Bill Lewis. So, a native son here, you might.
Oh, okay.
But Bill Lewis was kind of looking to semi-retire, looking to sell his practice, and Rick, being who he was not intimidated by the fact he was going to be graduating vet school at the age of 25. No business experience, but Crocker Bank would give us a loan on a signature, $60,000. What the heck? What the heck? In the 70s. So we were able to buy Bill Lewis's clinic. Bill stayed on because he wanted to kind of ease out
Right.
and teach this young kid. And we bought 20 acres in Forest Hill straight away. I was an appraiser at Home Federal Savings, so
Yeah. So what year was that?
that was in 78.
78. You know, thinking about like Auburn in 1978, the sport of endurance and Tevis is really coming into itself as far as how,
Numbers.
pardon me?
Numbers.
Numbers, and more, I mean, more international attention. And so what was just the feel of that time period, especially focusing on the Western States 100-mile ride?
Well, through Phil and Hal, and then we very quickly got to know Kathy and Ernie Perry. In fact, Greg Perry had his first paying job. He was a kennel boy for us at the clinic,
Okay.
So no, we always had the hum was always going.
Yeah.
Always knew how the sausage was made, so to speak. And
So-
for us, for our life was a whole lot bigger than what,
That's a hobby.
we never had interest in it as a business.
When was your first Tevis ride?
1977,
77. So just
right
the
after.
next year.
the next
Which horse did you
On
ride?
Retro Rocket.
On Retro Rocket.
And I had no idea that he was that good. The talent that he was. Because one thing you learn real early, nobody wants to talk about anything but their own horse.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to brag about anything but their own horse. So Retro didn't even get so much as a side eye, except Phil was pretty good at teasing him. We'd side by side, and anyway, he stuck his finger down ear, you tickle them, because they're getting that big chest on to start some kind of a race, and Phil would
Yeah.
just reach over and stick his ear, and then they crowd with a flat ear, And again, for us, we just played, and for me, straight away, you love the trail. I love being out on that trail.
More
The
people down at the
smell.
bottom by the bridge.
And the energy. I mean, that was a very busy place before we ever set foot on it as an event.
Yes.
Very busy place all through that. So you feel that energy, and you see the wear already in that trail through the canyons, and that wear didn't happen from us.
Yeah.
Those towns didn't build and burn and build and burn and build, and you see all those ruins and all those periwinkles and all those daffodils because we put them there. That was all, and that's what a treasure. And then to
It really
experience
is.
it on horseback, which is how the trail was lived, either on foot or horseback.
Yeah.
So, it's that's what gets you curious about coming back.
I like the fact that all the rides, as much experience as you have, and not just on the Western States 100-mile ride, but just endurance in general, all the rides you've ridden, that you always seem to go back to that trail. It seems like that's where your heart is.
And what it was for me creatively, I realized straight away is it was the measure of my ability to develop a horse.
Yes.
Because I used to quilt a lot rather than study, got to work on the quilt.
Anyway, I look at quilting is like engineering. You've got to start right, otherwise your goof
Expands through the whole project. And it's the same way with horses. I think that's where maybe I was pre-adapted.
for the creative piece of it. Is I looked at it creatively. You start like the two horses I started with on the XP. I mean, by the end, Retro was carrying the weight, and Red was, because he had corns. I mean, let's don't go into farriers and the lack thereof on something like that. So a picture of him from being pendulously obese in St. Joe to a picture of Rick walking in the Carson sink, and there's the profile of an endurance horse. The headset, the shoulder release, and this not humble, but an ego. Not the head up ego, but there is nothing that this body can't flatten.
You recognize that then.
Oh, as a horseman, yes.
I mean, that's pretty incredible because, I mean, you have this background, but you are just naturally recognized that this horse was what you're trying to attain as a
Well,
distance
not even
horse?
know. Well, what happens, what translates in what you see is what you ride. And there is nothing more satisfying than riding a well-mannered or a conversational mannered, no, a fit, well-trained, balanced endurance horse. I mean, you feel it. Your quality of life goes through the roof.
There was a point, if we're going to go that direction, because I think this is a great direction to go, is about your building of the horse. And
Yes.
and the one thing that you're saying is Tevis is like where you prove it. That's the ride you can prove your program.
And to yourself.
And to yourself. Prove and
Mostly as runners say, I had a better time, as you, with this horse you've developed.
one of your sayings, and maybe I really think that anybody watching this video should hear this aspect, is you say you go from training to coaching.
Yes.
And so can you explain more about that aspect and that mindset?
It has parallels in human athletics. That's one thing the run did for us straight away. The runners could verbalize what we have to use X-ray vision and telepathy and a lot of nonverbal means of knowing with a horse. But the runners could express when you hit the canyons, when they hit the heat, when you screw up on your electrolytes, the mental impact that has, and then how that can then translate to their overall physical well-being.
Yeah.
So it's like this feedback loop starts setting in. And with any young horse, you're riding a circle. You are trying to bring the horse an awareness of himself and what's possible. And we always call you're riding the circle, because squirrel, you're trying to get them linear. And that's something, see, for my first ride, if you think about them on the XP, I started out riding a circle with Retro especially. Red, he was a hunter of coyotes.
Yeah.
But, so you're just trying to bring your hands, your attention to this blob of energy, okay, into something of an athletic mind, that the mind and the body are kind of working together here, and that it really does make you feel better to switch diagonals, does make you feel better to come through your different gait changes better. I mean, there's a self-interest in all that stuff to the horse. So you kind of nudge that in, and then they kind of get hooked on being an athlete, okay? And that's where we call it when their lights come on.
Okay.
I mean, anybody who's developed a horse, you know that ride. It's usually not in training. It's in a competition where you think you had this one relationship, and then suddenly the lights came on. You're going, oh, son of a gun, should have worn gloves. And that is, for me, that's the game. And then once you get that, then you're still nudging always the body, but that's when you're riding the mind. You're coaching.
You're coaching.
You're coaching. And some horses, I've had those that'll offer 200%. That's scary. That was Risky Rocket. I have those that have their definite opinions on how certain types of ground will be moved across. Not safe in my mind, but Van was perfectly feeling safe in his. I mean, I won with him first in 1980, and he just, basically, it was a present I'd given to Rick, that horse was. And he was a Wiedezarf, very closely related to Donna Fitzgerald's horse. So I bought him sight unseen. And they were both stubborn men, my husband and the horse. So it was like watching a bad marriage. So he finally came to that point where he said, I'm done. And Retro had come out from under me, literally. He won Castle Rock by running away with me. And in doing so, he chipped a sesamoid bone because he was bench-kneed, toed in. So I said, well, I'll give him a go. I rode Van, and when we get up into
Red Star Ridge, all that really horrible, crappy ground. You know, well, step one, they've got to be really strong. And he'd finished 18th on Tevis. I mean, you know, he was bred for it. But what was different is I had a conversation with Van, and I'd make deals with him. And I said, okay, you can be big trot cantering over Red Star Ridge in the rocks, that old trail where we drop into Duncan Canyon, all that stuff. And if you don't trip, I'm with you, buddy. The minute you trip, you're mine. Also, I did not allow anybody to get off trail for me, especially at that time of day. Everybody's nervous as can be.
Yeah.
So I would say, fine, if you're going to take the pass, you're going to do it in the crap, where you can't see the rocks, you can't see anything through the brush. So he just popped off, popped back on. So he was already, I think, top 5 at Robinson, just being Van.
Yeah. He's saying, I got this.
And then the horse had extraordinary recoveries. I mean, I got into Last Chance, and there's, you know, because there's always, the big guns are always gunning.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's always been entertaining. But I get into Last Chance, and there are the big guns, and they're all, you know, just putting their horse in water. Van was 60, we left. I mean, he got a big drink, you know what I mean? You're not going to rob them of their spa time, but he got his big drink and we left. So then we just started breaking away. He was just riding, he was just doing Van.
Yeah.
But I had been warned going in, because Rick told me, he says, this pony's got quirks. He's got quirks. So we get in, we're climbing up into Michigan Bluff, and there are those switchbacks, you know, before you do the last bit. He said, every time I've ridden, I think he only rode Van a couple times on it, but he said he refuses at the second switchback from the top. And there's no effing reason he should be refusing, but Van didn't like those switchbacks, all right? So sure enough, you know, I'm working him through. And when a horse refuses on you, you're thinking they're running out of gas. You're thinking there's a problem. So thank goodness he told me.
Yeah.
Because I'm by myself, and Van gets to that point, so nobody's towing us. And he goes, F you, and did a 180, headed back downhill, and I went, you son of a bitch. You were called out on this one. Turned him around, we went, just crazy stuff. So that was his temperament. And Retro he was just the man. He ended up never getting pulled from Tevis. He finished it 7 times. Got 4 of us our first Tevis Cup buckles.
Wow.
But he's that guy who could trot up out of those canyons. But he was big-bodied, so his bench knee towed in. He was a panter with probably a relatively high resting pulse.
Yeah.
But you manage that.
Yeah.
You try to coach them away from their weakness, or you turn a weakness into not a problem, and you embrace their strengths, and you keep their strength strong, too.
Yeah.
You don't exploit it. And then what was once a great uphill or downhill horse because of chink in the armor, now they're guarding. And horses guard a long, long time before they're ever lame to a vet. And every rider, if they don't know what they're feeling,
Yeah.
but they may be feeling guarding.
Right.
And Red taught me that on the Pony Express because he developed corns. And it was interesting. In his we had those little electric wire paddocks, you know, the single strand. He would, in camp, he was guarding. The minute I would take him out to trot for Dave,
Yeah.
he loved it. When Retro was, he got the flu, all young horses do. So I had to put the heavy weight. Red went 10 days without a break. So he went over 300 miles in 10 days. And I was all worried because you can't get calories in them when you're not riding fast, okay?
Yeah.
Steady, but it's hard to get the calories in. So by then we're feeding peanut oil, you know, a cup a day. That's a nice thing. These experienced Hal and Phil and, you know, knew all this stuff, had already been working with it. So we were just listening hard. Of course, Dave Nicholson. But Red was losing weight, and I was starting to bring Retro back. So I thought I would do Red a favor and let him have some time off. Well, guess who goes off his feet? The Red guy. He's like, hell no, what? You throwing me under the bus? Making me ride in the trailer? So that tells you how they lie.
Yeah.
They lie. And anywhere we've lived, if I've made a point, with the exception of Colorado, Pennsylvania, I could see them out my bedroom window. So you can see them when nobody's watching. When they first get up in the morning, they haven't had their coffee, so to speak. And you can see.
Great. Thank you so much, Lori. You know I love you, and
Love
we
you.
go way back, and I'm
Yes,
just so
we
glad I
do.
got this opportunity.
He still looks like a puppy, but we go back to the 70s, because what, you were 13 when you were shoeing our horses?
Probably. So I really appreciate you
Yeah,
being here and
thank you.
sharing. And
This was a
it's
treat
great.
for me.